Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Home Building Hub. You're with Colin and co-host Darren Brennan as always. Today, Dazza, we are going to talk about a little topic called facades, and particularly we're going to talk about whether it's worth upgrading them or not. And this came off the back of an email we received a while back, just I guess asking the question. You know, there's so many options out there choosing a house. And there's even more choosing a facade, upgrade, standard, what sort of material, and if you're doing a single versus a double story. So we'll cover a little bit of that for the guys and the girls listening and watching today. How you going, buddy?
Going well, mate. Yeah, real good. Short, sharp episode, mate. I think it's a really relevant one that comes up often. You know, we often get asked the question, or I see it on online forums or customers in the displays asking about, is there value in upgrading my facade? My friends are telling me to, others are telling me not to. Uncle Gary's, he's at his word. Everyone's involved in that discussion. So, yeah, it's a good topic, I think, and hopefully we can, make it a little less muddy for people.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, let's jump in. So first and foremost, I guess for those who are really early in the piece, Daz, I'll cover off what is a facade. Yep. So a facade essentially represents the face of your home. It's the front, that curb or street appeal, the design articulation, the materials, the finishes, and ultimately the colours as well. So that's what makes up the front of the house. For those out there, just to be clear, it's pronounced facade, not facade.
Can I ask you though?
Hey?
You said facade before this podcast. When was the last time someone called it a facade? Come on. Well, let's be fair. I haven't heard it for a while, a long time, in fact. I know you must be listening to different people. I don't get it. It's like people go balloon or balloon. I don't know.
No one does balloon, surely.
Or potato. You know when people say is it potato or potato? It's a facade, guys. It's
facade, facade. It is a facade, yes.
It's a facade.
Look, Darren, I don't know how long it's been since someone said that, but just trying to be polite and encouraging for people to not embarrass themselves. That's all.
True.
A little bit like you and I are right now. So
absolutely.
Anyway, so it's basically so facade is the front. I guess explain what those sort of features are. So realistically, let's refer it to street appeal. Okay, so that's really what it is, like the pride you get when you drive on up and that's your house, your facade. So that's probably how to explain what it is. And let's maybe move into over to you, Daz, on how many facade options are available to people to choose from.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, most builders give a choice of facades within the included range, I guess they would call it, or as included in their base price, and that's somewhere between 3 and 6 usually, and it could be more with some builders. So some have an extensive range, but you're going to get plenty of choices without having to upgrade. These days they're pretty good. Back in the days when we first started selling, Colin, some were really terrible. They're pretty crappy looking. A window on the front door, and you're lucky to get both those, I reckon, half the time.
Yeah.
So they're pretty ordinary. These days they include things like eaves and multiple materials, generally too, but a bit of render and some brickwork. Gone are the old days, generally speaking, where you get a roller door. You generally get a nice panel lift garage door included. Some nice windows, so nice awning window on the facade. Those sort of things are all generally included. For the most part, they cover the items that are required for any developer requirements, which is great, but not always. And again, we'll give you a couple of tips on that as we go throughout the episode. But, again, each builder's going to have their own spin on what that standard facade should look like. And then, outside of that, there's going to be some pretty amazing upgraded facade options available. And these days, I remember when I first started selling, there was a facade on a home and it was a Simmons home on the other side of town, and it was about 80 or 90 grand. And I went and looked to see how many of those had actually sold, and they'd sold only ever one, and it was on the actual display home. So they never actually sold that facade. But these days we're seeing on some of these beautiful double stories out there, facades of the same sort of cost, 80, 90 grand, but people are actually spending that money because they look exceptional, and they can be a real showstopper for your home. So, don't be surprised if you walk in and you hear that facade's 80 grand, because there are some facades on displays in your general display village in that sort of price range. Again, it's not for everyone. And some of them might be 2 grand, or
Yeah.
$1,500 or 5 grand or 10 grand. So, 80 grand is not the common, but they are commonly sold, is more my
And
point.
the
So,
average there, Daz, I mean, not to scare people off, like if you've got a really, we're trying to cover different buyer types here, if
yeah,
you've got a
absolutely.
really healthy budget, but for the average bear that goes out there, facade upgrades, they range from 5 to 20K. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I reckon 20K is probably a stretch too on
It's pretty high.
in
Yeah.
most occasions. So, but again, some big doubles might end up with more than that.
Mm.
You end up with a balcony or something on there, could be significantly more, and depending on how grand that thing gets, because some of them, like I say, there's some pretty incredible facades out there right now, and um, you know, people are wanting that more and more and are happy to pay. And there are different audiences out there as well. So, your typical first home buyer, they ain't spending 90 grand on a facade, and in fact, most of them won't even upgrade the facade and they'll still have a wonderful looking house. So I guess the next question, Cole, is it worth spending the money on an upgraded facade?
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, revealing what's possible. I believe back in the day, facade you pretty much were forced to upgrade because the entry level was
Yep,
rubbish, and that was almost strategic in a sense from a builder to get a bit more of an upgrade in the business. But now it is different. You've got, I think everyone's giving really good standard facades that are
yeah,
there.
cool.
So my honest answer to that is if you're a first home buyer or you're an investor or realistically someone who is looking at the budget and it's a little tight and you're working out whether you should or shouldn't. My answer to you was I see no benefit in upgrading a facade over some additional cosmetics and upgrades internally that are functional that will actually make you enjoy your home more so than the way it looks at the front. But that's just an opinion because there's no right or wrong there. That's just my view, particularly an investor and a first home buyer. But if you're a second home buyer, you've hit the budget, maybe a small upgrade facade worth 2, 3, 4 grand rather than one of the $15,000 ones. And that extra 10 grand might get you something, some better heating and cooling as an upgrade. It might get you, a whole range of things through the kitchen and those sorts of things. So I believe that's a better win, regardless of resale value. I believe that's just a better win for you, the buyer. But that's, as I said, just my opinion.
Yep,
If it's your second, third home, you've got the budget, then I actually do believe ultimately that there's a sense of pride with all this, Daz. You want your house to stand out and you want to feel proud of that. And you don't want it to just be the same as the one 5 houses down and things like that. So if you've got the budget for it and it is, it's your dream house, then go for it. Like, don't let it hold you back. It's just, I believe most people, Darren, generally, who are probably listening to this podcast would most likely sit into a first home buyer, perhaps an investor, and
yep.
a little less so second, third, fourth, excuse me, home buyers. So yeah, that's probably my advice on that one. One tip I would give, again, just an opinion, I would avoid any timber finish where possible. And that's because it does look great in displays and on day one and month one, but it will fade and it will need to be restained and
Yep.
looked after ongoing. And you see those homes after 12 months, and most of the time they don't get maintained and they go this really ugly grey color, and it's just not like that beautiful stained red brown color that it was. So just a
100%.
little tip there: try and keep that timber finish away unless you're going to get up there and stain it and make it look really good ongoing.
It's interesting, even with the timber finishes, Colo. no, on a display we've just opened, they've used aluminium that looks like timber. So again, there's products
Right.
coming out. You can get that mod wood, which is like a plastic that again looks like timber. A lot of decking's getting done in mod wood these days. So there are alternatives as well that do look really good, that don't fade and don't look ugly in the long term. So it's
Yeah.
interesting sort of seeing as those items come to the market how good they can look. So
So
which
my
is good.
conclusion, is it worth spending the money? If your budget permits, of course. But for most people, I mean, in my experience, most people have to sacrifice something. Even if your budget's $2 million, by the time you jam all the stuff inside the house that you want, you'll find
Yeah,
that there's a few of those items you've got to pull back out because it's gone over budget. It doesn't really matter how big or small your budget is. You'll find, I believe, Darren, that everyone sort of hits that limit, and they're like, okay, I've got to get a few of those needs in there, maybe take a few wants back out, and that regardless of budget is a reality, I think, for every home buyer. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Cool. Just from my end, Cole, a few things I'd say on that is, sometimes depending on what the builder includes, you might find, for example, you need to do brick infills above the garage, and that could be, let's call it $1,800 or $2,000 or somewhere about that. It might be $2,000 upgrade to a facade that's actually got that on it already. And then you get a nicer looking facade. So I've often seen that. So sometimes it's worth checking out, does the facade itself, if you upgrade, include some of the items that you may need to already upgrade. So you might find you either getting it for free or getting it for very little money and getting a much nicer looking facade with a bit of articulation and stuff on it. So that can be one that's really good for you. I guess the other one I'd say is, if you know you're buying into it, some of the estates are really nice these days. They set a really high standard. Then people lift the bar nice and high as well amongst the street. And if you're in a street that's, full of upgraded facades, you don't necessarily want to be the cheapest looking house in the street either. So, from a resale point of view, so it's well worth having a look if it's already sort of built up a bit around you. What does it look like? And then decide whether it's worth spending some money. The other one I've always said to people is, though, I believe the best looking house is the one with the nicest looking garden. So if you go and have really lush lawn, a beautiful trim garden, nice mulches, no weeds, some, if it's flowers you're after, you've got beautiful flowers flowering, etc. The garden will take away from the facade that's behind it, and you'll end up actually having possibly the nicest looking house in the street, and you won't have upgraded your facade. And I've seen that time and time again. The other one, I guess, Cole, to look at is, with double stories, would you, put a balcony on it? And, what does that sort of work like? And I've lived in a house that had a front balcony and a back balcony. The front one was never used. And to
Same.
the point that we actually lost the key, and for 2 years we never went on it, and we didn't care. And the only time I had to get on there was with a ladder to get my son's football, because he'd be kicking the footy in the front yard and he'd go up on top of it. And it was the only way to get it down. With that one, the other part is it didn't have a roof over it. So it actually leaked, and it often happens, you hear about it all the time, that balconies actually leak water. So a lot of builders won't build a balcony over the top of an internal living space. And that's because they're going to make it into a swimming pool, essentially. They're going to try and waterproof it like a swimming pool. If your pool's leaking, you probably don't even know about it because it's leaking into the ground and you don't see it. Whereas a balcony leaks, and next thing, the roof above that, underneath that, all of a sudden it's bubbling and, got water coming through it and potentially falling down. So it can be an issue with that as well. That being said, we had a rear balcony that had amazing views, and we went on that balcony nearly every day. We did a couple of other things that probably forced us to use it as well, which we put our washing line out on that balcony because it got a lot of updrift wind, and our washing dried in about 3 seconds out there. But we loved going out on that balcony and looking out at the views. We had views of the bay at the time. And it was spectacular. That was in Point Cook, and we were one of the luckiest people, in there. But the other side of that too is, often there's screening required, so you can't look
Mm.
directly into your neighbour's property. So half of our view was screened off anyway with this ugly looking treated pine screening, because that's what the builder provided at the time. So it wasn't the best look. We had, yes, the view directly to the rear was unbelievable, but be mindful, screening will be required at times, even on a front balcony. So talk to your builder about, is there going to be any overlooking issues? Am I going to have ugly looking screens up? What's the go with this? Because some people go, I'll put a balcony on the back of my house as well, and then they screen the entire balcony in. So you might as well not have it. You might as well have it as an internal room and do it that way. So I think the trade-off often is balcony or additional space. And again, if it's on the front and there's nothing to look at, you're looking out at the street, I'd be saying put the space inside the house and look out the windows. It's just as nice. You probably do it more often too.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, I do recall cleaning out a whole family of redbacks on our front balcony that we never used.
Yeah, there you
Only
go.
did that when we were moving out. Didn't realise they were there, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was quite interesting. But took us a while to find the key as well, there, Daz, for that one. So
Well, no,
it
we
is,
like the
yeah,
same. We lost the key 2 years. Had no idea
yeah,
where it was.
it's funny. Yeah, quite familiar. So I think let's finish this off with a couple of tips, I guess, to help you make the right choice as a home buyer, um, in terms of really how to visualize it. So you're at a display, you're talking to someone, you've got a book there with a render, and you're online looking at this render, and you're thinking, okay, that looks pretty good. What you do need to understand is that builders don't have generally they won't have a render for every house and every facade type on every lot width. It's not really how it works. So you might be looking at a render, the render being the image online or in the booklet of a 14-meter wide design, but you may be building a 10.5-meter wide design. So it's going to be more narrow. It's going to have less windows. It may have render or brick in different spots compared to that nice wide looking facade render you're looking at online initially. Okay, so be mindful of that. What I like to recommend to people is two things. One, get a copy of the drawings. So not the marketing image. Ask for a copy. If you got down to the point where you're actually picking a house, just say, hey, can I please have a look at the actual drawings? And you want to scroll down, you want to go to the facade elevations and see how it's drawn. And that'll give you a nice outline image or
Yeah.
picture of the structure of that facade, how wide it is, etc., and what finishes and features are on it. Yeah, awning window will be on there, where the render is, where the brick is, where the timber cladding is, etc. And then also what you can do is ask your sales consultant if there's a couple of addresses they could point you towards that you could drive past and have a look, and or even real photos of real facades of that house being built. That will help you get, okay, yeah, you'll just tick that confidence box. Yep, I actually do love that. It looks really good.
Yeah.
Let's push ahead. Or it may send you back the other way and it might have saved you a lot of, I guess, angst, because really you don't know how that facade's going to look otherwise until the thing's built and you got handover. They don't put render on till the last minute to finalize all that. So yeah, it's probably a couple of really helpful tips there, Daz.
You can try, and it's getting better every day. But if you've got ChatGPT, you can certainly try putting the line drawings that you're talking about, Cole, from the plans into ChatGPT and getting it to render it. And it'll do a pretty good job. I think it's improving almost daily. So I'm using that a bit myself at the moment. And the other one is, if you've got a nighttime image of a facade, and you want to see what it's going to look like in the day, or it's got darker colours and you want lighter colours, again, try it in ChatGPT. May or may not work, but as time advances on that sort of space, I think you'll see it working exceptionally well. So have a bit of a play there, and it might help you as well, depending on when we're recording this early July 25. You might be listening to this July 26, and that advancements is through the roof. Let's wait and see, but already it's getting much better. So yeah, have a play there.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, folks. That's hopefully helpful, some value, save you a little bit of time, and get you just some opinions from us. They're not right, they're not wrong. You do what's right for you, and definitely take those tips in before you do finalise that facade. As always, guys, if you've got any topics, any ideas, feedback, just go to the website, or you can send us an email, hello@homebuildinghub.com.au. And of course, Darren, as we say, please leave us a 5-star review on the platform you're on. That would be really helpful. And other than that, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Cheers. Good on you. Thanks, Cole.
Thanks for listening to the Home Building Hub. As part of the podcast, we have to be a little careful to cover ourselves on a legal standpoint. So we do have a disclaimer. Whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered legal or financial advice. It does contain general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your own personal situation before you make any legal or financial decisions.